I had always trusted Rachel. We had built our lives together, piece by piece, and I had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. But I guess that's how it always happens, right? You don't see the cracks until it's too late. It all started with the bank statement. I wasn't snooping, at least, not at first. I was going through the usual routine of paying bills when something caught my eye. The hotel charges. A high-end resort, in a city I knew she was supposed to be working in. She told me she had a business trip scheduled, a presentation she had to give, but here was this charge, right in the middle of the time she should have been presenting to clients. The sum wasn't small either. It was enough for me to wonder what kind of business trip required a stay at a luxury hotel. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was probably a mistake, that maybe the charge was for something work-related that I didn't understand. But deep down, I knew something was off. I spent the next few days replaying that moment over and over, unable to ignore the gnawing feeling that had started to eat away at me. Was I really going to confront her over a hotel bill? Could I even trust my own suspicions? It felt ridiculous, paranoid even. But then I started paying attention. I checked her schedule again, double-checked her emails. Nothing. Her story had never seemed so thin before. The business trip didn't add up, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how she'd been acting strangely for weeks. The late nights, the texts that always seemed to be just a little too secretive. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this eat at me without getting answers. The next morning, Rachel left for another business meeting. This time, I decided to follow her. I didn't tell her I was going to check on her. No, I needed to know the truth, and I wasn't going to ask for it. I was going to see it for myself. I kept my distance, but I stayed close enough to watch her. I followed her to the same expensive hotel. My stomach twisted into knots as I parked across the street, staring at the building. There was no reason for her to be there. It wasn't a mistake. She knew exactly what she was doing. My heart pounded in my chest. The woman I had loved and trusted for years, the one I thought I knew so well, had been lying to me, and I had just walked straight into her deception. I watched as she checked into the hotel, the way she glanced over her shoulder as if she knew someone might be watching. It wasn't just a business trip. It wasn't even close. I spent the next few hours pacing, trying to decide what to do next. I could confront her, but that would only give her the chance to lie to me again. I wasn't sure if I could handle that anymore. No, I had to do something. Something cold. Something calculated. As evening fell, I left my car and walked into the hotel. I couldn't let her see me, so I made my way quietly, staying hidden in the shadows. I waited, watching, until I saw Rachel enter a room with someone else. A man I didn't recognize. They didn't even bother to hide it. They kissed before she opened the door, her hand on his chest, and then they disappeared inside. I was numb. I didn't know whether to scream or cry, or both. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? But I wasn't going to let this betrayal go unanswered. This was no longer about the marriage. This was about me, the man who had been betrayed, left with nothing but the hollow echo of trust that had been shattered. I waited until they were settled inside the room before I made my move. Cold, calculated, like a stranger. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. Revenge? Justice? Closure? The lines had blurred. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest as I stood outside the hotel room, the weight of the situation crashing over me like a wave I couldn't escape. I had seen enough. I knew what was going on, and the shock of it all was starting to wear off, replaced by a strange, cold clarity. This wasn't just some random mistake. This was planned. This was deliberate. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't go home and pretend I hadn't seen what I had. Pretend that everything was fine. Rachel, my wife, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was betraying me right in front of my eyes. And I had just stood there, watching it unfold, powerless to stop it. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was that I knew, deep down, that she wasn't even going to feel guilty about it. She wouldn't apologize. She wouldn't regret what she was doing. This wasn't some isolated incident. This was her choice, her decision to walk away from everything we had built together. I stood frozen for a long time, not sure what to do next. I had considered calling her, confronting her right there. But no, she had already made her choice. It wouldn't be a confrontation. It would be a pathetic attempt to salvage something that was already gone. Instead, I turned and walked back to my car. I couldn't stay there any longer, staring at the walls of that hotel, thinking about the lies she had fed me. I had to do something, something that would give me back control, something that would show her that I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. I drove aimlessly, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. The city lights blurred past me, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about all the years we had spent together, the good moments, the bad moments, the promises we made to each other. None of it mattered now. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by sitting in the dark. After a while, I found myself at a bar. The kind of place where you could lose yourself in the noise, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. I sat down, ordered a drink, and stared into the amber liquid as if it could provide some sort of answer. As if I could drown out the thoughts that kept swirling in my mind. I was barely aware of the people around me, too consumed by the fury and betrayal gnawing at my insides. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar face. It was Rachel's best friend, Monica. She was sitting at a table with some of her coworkers, laughing, looking carefree. And for the first time, I wanted to smash something. How did she not know? How did she not see it coming? Monica had been there for everything. The late nights, the arguments, the good times too. She knew everything, or at least, she should have. I stood up from my seat, my legs shaky, my fists clenched. I didn't care anymore. I needed answers. I walked over to their table, Monica's laughter fading when she noticed me. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked, looking surprised but not exactly concerned. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The look on my face said everything. She knew what I had seen. She knew exactly what I was asking. "Rachel's been seeing someone else, hasn't she?" I asked, my voice flat, dead. Monica's eyes widened, and I saw a flicker of guilt flash across her face before she quickly masked it with an awkward smile. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Monica. I saw her, with him. The hotel. The man she's been sneaking around with." Her face paled. The color drained from her cheeks as she looked around the room nervously. "Dave, you shouldn't be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned in closer, my anger growing. You knew this whole time, didn't you? And you didn't say a word." Monica's eyes darted away, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear anything that would give me even a glimpse of hope that this wasn't real, that she hadn't helped cover it up. The silence between us felt heavy. She finally spoke, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Dave. I never wanted this to happen. I thought she would tell you. I didn't know how to." "How to what?" I cut her off. "How to protect me from the truth. From the betrayal? From everything she's been hiding?" I stood there for a long moment, just staring at her, my body rigid with anger. I didn't want her pity. I didn't want her apology. I wanted Rachel to feel the weight of what she'd done, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one left in the dark, trying to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer existed. But in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. This was about me, about reclaiming my own dignity, my own power. And if I had to watch the world burn to do it, then so be it. The bar felt suffocating, the air thick with the weight of all the unspoken truths hanging between Monica and me. I stood there, staring at her, my chest tight with frustration, but I wasn't sure where to direct the anger anymore. Monica had confessed what I already knew, and yet somehow, hearing her admit it out loud made the betrayal sharper, more real. "I never wanted to hurt you, Dave," she said, her voice small, barely above a whisper. But I didn't care. The damage was done. I turned on my heel and left without another word, my mind racing. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, the anger clouding my thoughts. The streets outside were quiet, but I couldn't calm the storm inside me. I needed to act. I needed to take control. Rachel had no idea what was coming. I spent the next couple of hours in a haze, aimlessly driving through the city, the rage simmering inside me. I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for letting it happen. for trusting someone who had made a fool of me. I found myself outside the apartment she and I had once called home, the place where we had shared so many moments, the good, the bad, the mundane. And yet, tonight, it felt like a foreign place, a place where my life had no meaning anymore. The walls of that apartment no longer held the warmth of love. They now carried the bitter taste of betrayal. Rachel would be home soon. I knew that, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I waited. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, the headlights of her car appeared around the corner. She pulled into the driveway, humming some song I didn't recognize. And I watched, seething, as she stepped out of the car, her smile already plastered on her face, just like nothing had changed. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I walked toward her, my steps heavy and deliberate. My voice, when I spoke, was ice cold. "So, how was the business trip?" I asked, my tone flat, like I was talking to a stranger. Rachel froze, her smile faltering as she looked at me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a little too light, too casual. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence between us stretched long, thick with the truth I had finally uncovered. "You thought you could keep lying to me forever?" I continued, my voice quieter now, but sharp. "You thought I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't catch on?" Her eyes widened in panic, the smile vanishing completely as her hands began to tremble. "Dave, what are you talking about?" I didn't answer her again. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. The ones I had taken that afternoon, photos of her and him, walking into the hotel. The kiss, the smiles, the intimacy she had been hiding. All of it was there, staring at her, undeniable. Her face turned pale as she backed away, her mouth opening and closing as if she was trying to find words. But there were no words. There was nothing she could say to make this right. "Who is he?" I asked, the question heavy in the air. "Do you really want me to believe this was just some business trip?" Rachel opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked down at the ground, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt. But it was too late for apologies. Too late for anything. I felt the rage building again, but I fought it down. I wasn't going to let her see me lose control. No, this was about control. About showing her that I wasn't the man she thought I was. That I wasn't going to sit around and let her continue to treat me like I was nothing. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice low and deliberate. "Pack your things and go. You're not welcome here anymore." She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears, but I didn't care. I had no sympathy for her. Not now. Not after everything she had done. "I don't want this to end," she said, her voice shaky. "Please, Dave, I never meant for it to happen. It's not what you think." "Save it," I spat. "You made your choice, and now you'll deal with the consequences." She hesitated for a moment, her eyes searching mine, but I wasn't the same man anymore. I wasn't the man she could manipulate, the one who would forgive and forget. That man had died the moment I saw her with him. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her car, her hands trembling as she unlocked it. I watched her go, feeling strangely empty. There was no satisfaction in this, no victory, just the cold, hollow feeling of a life shattered. I stood there for a long time, not sure what to do next. The man I had been, the man who believed in love and trust, was gone. The anger, the betrayal, it had all consumed me. I wasn't sure where Rachel was going. I didn't care. I just knew that it was over, that this was the end of something I had once believed in. And in that moment, I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. I didn't know if I wanted revenge, or if I just wanted to forget it all. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to be the same man I had been when she left that morning. The next few days passed in a blur. Rachel was gone. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Every corner seemed to echo with the emptiness she had left behind. I tried to fill the silence with distractions, work, errands, even late-night walks, but nothing helped. The weight of everything hung over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something in me had snapped. The man I was, the man I used to be, felt like a stranger now. I hadn't heard from Rachel. Not a call, not a message. Part of me wondered if she even cared. Part of me didn't want to know. I had made it clear. She was gone, and I wasn't going to beg her to come back. But that didn't stop the thoughts from creeping in. The questions that I couldn't quite shake. What went wrong? How did it come to this? I'd spent so many years building this life, trusting her, loving her, and it all crumbled in the span of a few hours. The anger I had felt that night, fury that burned so hot it left me numb, was fading, replaced by something colder, something worse. Regret. I hated myself for letting her in. I hated myself for loving someone who could throw it all away so easily. But more than that, I hated that I didn't see it coming. How had she gotten so good at hiding it? At lying? She had played me like a fool, and I couldn't even blame her. I had let it happen. The phone rang one night, shattering the silence that had become my constant companion. I didn't recognize the number, but my stomach dropped when I picked up. Hello? Dave, Rachel's voice cracked through the phone, fragile and weak. She sounded different, like someone who had finally run out of excuses. I need to talk to you. My first instinct was to hang up, to just end it, to wash my hands of her for good. But I didn't. I didn't know why, but something held me there, listening. What do you want, Rachel? My voice was cold, but it wasn't enough to hide the hurt that still lingered. It felt like a shadow, constantly following me. I'm sorry, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. I'm so sorry, Dave. I made a huge mistake. Please, can we talk? I don't know what to do anymore. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. She sounded desperate, but I wasn't sure if it was for me or for herself. Did she regret what she did, or was she just regretting getting caught? Save it, I snapped. I've heard enough of your apologies. What's done is done. There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought she might hang up, but then I heard her voice, softer now, tinged with something like real emotion. I never meant to hurt you. I was just so lost, Dave. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought I could keep everything together, but I was just fooling myself. I love you. I always have. It took everything in me not to let the words sink in. She was good, too good at playing the victim. I wasn't going to fall for it. Not again. No, Rachel, I said, my voice barely a whisper now. You loved me, and then you threw it all away. Don't act like you're the one who's hurting now. You made your choice. I made a mistake, she pleaded. I wasn't thinking straight, and I thought I could have both. My life with you and what I thought I needed. But I was wrong. I see that now. Can't we fix this? Please, Dave. I don't know what to do without you. Her words felt like poison. They sounded so familiar. Like every apology she'd given me over the years, every time she promised she'd change, only to slip back into the same habits. And I had been foolish enough to believe her. But not anymore. Rachel, I said, my voice firmer now, colder. I don't think you get it. You don't get to come back. Not this time. I'm done. I hung up before she could say anything else. The finality of it hit me harder than I expected. But it was the right choice. It had to be. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. I wasn't going to let her break me. But as I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, I realized something. The pain wasn't gone. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I needed closure. I needed to know that I had done the right thing, that I had taken control of my own life again. And that meant one last conversation. The days following that phone call were a blur. The weight of it all, of what Rachel had done, of what I had lost, still hung around me like a dark cloud, heavy and suffocating. I told myself I was done, that I had made the right choice, that cutting her off would bring me the peace I was craving. But every time I closed my eyes, the image of her, the woman I once loved, haunted me. The soft smile, the way she used to hold me close, the promises we had shared. It all felt like a lifetime ago. But I couldn't keep looking back. If I did, I would lose myself in the past, and I couldn't afford that. Not anymore. Then, on the 5th day after the phone call, I got the message. It came in the form of a simple text, "We need to talk." Rachel. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. I had promised myself I wouldn't go back. I had promised myself I was done. And yet, here she was, reaching out again, trying to reopen the wounds I had worked so hard to close. I took a deep breath and pressed my thumb against the screen, typing back without thinking. Fine. One last time. But that's it. She agreed to meet at the park near our old neighborhood, the same place we had walked countless times, laughing and talking about our future. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the place where I had believed in us the most, and now it would be the place where I would finally close the door. As I pulled up to the park, I saw Rachel standing by the bench, her head lowered. She hadn't seen me yet. For a moment, I just watched her. Her posture slumped, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up with her. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it away. This wasn't about sympathy. This was about standing up for myself. I walked toward her, the sound of my footsteps crunching on the gravel the only thing breaking the silence. When she looked up, her face softened. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands, and I could see the tears in her eyes. It hurt to see her like this. It hurt more than I cared to admit. "Dave," she started, her voice breaking as she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice steady, but my chest tight. "We're past that." Rachel flinched, her face falling. "I know," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I messed up, Dave. I thought I could have it all, but I was wrong. And now I'm losing you, and I don't know what to do without you." I wanted to say something, wanted to tell her it was too late, but the words got stuck in my throat. I had been so sure of my decision when I hung up on her days ago, but now that she was standing here, so vulnerable, so broken, it was harder than I thought it would be. I took a step back, giving myself some space, forcing myself to focus. "Rachel," I said, my voice firm, "this isn't about you needing me. It's about me needing to move on. You had your chance, more than one, and you blew it." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I know. I'm not asking you to take me back. I just need to hear you say it. I need to know that what we had meant something to you, that I wasn't just some mistake." I looked at her, and for a moment, I almost wanted to tell her everything. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, the disappointment, everything I had been holding in. I wanted to tell her that, yes, once upon a time, she had meant everything to me. But that was the past. And the man I was now, the man standing here before her, he couldn't afford to live in the past anymore. "You meant everything to me once," I said, my voice quieter now, almost regretful. "But I can't live in that memory. I have to let you go." Rachel's face crumpled. Her tears fell freely now, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as if she was trying to hold herself together. "I'm sorry, Dave. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for it to end this way." The words were familiar, the same ones she had said so many times before. But this time, they didn't change anything. I was done. "I know you're sorry," I said, shaking my head. "But sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't make up for what you've done." She looked at me one last time, her eyes pleading, but I couldn't look back. The finality of it hit me harder than I expected, but it was right. It was what I needed. "I'm not the man you left," I said quietly, "and I'm not going to be the one you call to fix everything. You made your choice, Rachel. Now, you'll have to live with it." And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. It's strange how much a single moment can change everything. Walking away from Rachel that day wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. There was no grand sense of victory, no catharsis, just the cold, empty space left behind. It felt like a void had opened up where the last shred of hope had once lived. The days after the meeting dragged on. I tried to keep myself busy, but every corner of my life felt haunted by memories of her. I couldn't help but replay everything, the good, the bad, and the downright painful. I'd thought walking away from her would bring me peace, but all it brought was a suffocating silence. I'd made the decision. I'd drawn the line. And yet, I couldn't stop asking myself, was it the right choice? I spent long nights alone, staring out at the city from my apartment window, the lights below flickering in the distance like a reflection of my own confusion. Sometimes I'd convince myself that I was stronger than this, that I could move on. But the truth was, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Rachel had been my world for so long. To just cut that off, without a second thought, it left me feeling like a shadow of the man I used to be. But I couldn't turn back. I couldn't live in the past anymore. She'd shown me who she was, and now it was up to me to build something new. The next few weeks were a blur. I didn't hear from Rachel. At first, I wondered if she had found a way to move on, but deep down, I knew better. People like her, they never change. They just find new ways to deceive, new people to play their games with. I focused on work, on rebuilding my life. I spent time with friends who knew what had happened, who were there to remind me that I was still whole, still worth something. They didn't let me wallow. They didn't let me forget that I was a person with value, regardless of what Rachel had done. But sometimes, late at night, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still waiting for something. For an apology that would never come, for a sense of closure that I could never achieve. And that's when it hit me. The closure I needed wasn't going to come from Rachel. It had to come from within me. Time passed, and with it, the initial sting of betrayal began to fade. I started to feel like myself again, a version of me that wasn't defined by Rachel's lies. I spent more time at the gym, pushing my body to its limits in an attempt to clear my mind. I rediscovered hobbies I'd once enjoyed, reading books, photography, even trying my hand at cooking. I met new people, too. Nothing serious, just simple connections. Casual coffee dates with women who reminded me that there was a world beyond Rachel's shadow. But still, I couldn't bring myself to truly open up to anyone. It was as though a part of me had shut down completely, locked away in a place I couldn't even reach. One day, out of nowhere, I got a message from her. It was short, no explanation, just a text that read, "I hope you're doing okay." My first instinct was to ignore it, to delete it without a second thought. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I was still waiting for an apology. Maybe I was just lonely. I typed back, "I'm doing fine. And you?" A moment later, her reply came, "I'm sorry, Dave. I wish I could undo everything. But I understand if you never want to speak to me again." For a second, I stared at the screen, the weight of the words settling in. Was this an apology? Or was it just another attempt to get me to feel sorry for her? I couldn't tell. I thought about it for a long time, but in the end, I decided to reply with the only thing I knew to be true. "It's too late for that." And with that, I hit send. I never heard from her again. The next few months were a blur of healing. Slowly but surely, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I reconnected with old friends, started focusing on my career again, and found a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments when I'd catch myself wondering what could have been. But they were just moments, fleeting and nothing more. I met someone new. Her name was Ava, and she was different. She wasn't caught up in the same games that Rachel had played. Ava was kind, genuine, and patient. She didn't try to rush things, didn't try to fill the hole Rachel had left behind. She simply allowed me to be who I was, to take the time I needed. It wasn't love at first sight, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could trust again. Slowly, I opened up to her, sharing my fears, my past, my scars. And she listened, never rushing to fix me, just offering her support. It felt right, in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. But I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious. Not yet. I still had work to do on myself. A few months later, Rachel reached out to me once more. It was a simple message, just an apology. She didn't expect anything in return, didn't even ask to see me. She just wanted me to know that she had been working on herself, that she had made mistakes, and that she was truly sorry for the way things ended between us. This time, I didn't feel the need to respond. I didn't feel anything at all, really. I realized that, in all the years I had spent trying to fix our relationship, I had never truly fixed myself. And now, I was finally free. Free of the anger, free of the pain. Rachel's apology was nothing more than a reminder of how far I had come. I didn't need her forgiveness. I didn't need her to apologize to me anymore. I had already forgiven myself, and that was all that mattered. It's funny how life works. Just when you think you've lost everything, you find pieces of yourself you didn't even know were missing. I'd spent so many years living for someone else, for Rachel, that I had forgotten who I was. But now, I was starting to remember. I was no longer the man who had been betrayed, broken, and lost. I was a man who had found his strength again, who had learned to love himself first. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Rachel may have left scars, but I had learned to live with them. They no longer defined me. I was ready for the future, whatever it held, and I had no regrets. Because in the end, I wasn't just a man who had been cheated on. I was a man who had survived, and that was enough.